Thank you. We have never lived in a world where the health of people and the health of biodiverse ecosystems and the health of our planet could be effectively addressed in silos. Yet this is precisely how our global health institutions, our nature conservation institutions, and our climate institutions have established themselves in the last century, siloed, isolated, and apart from one another. Our desire to compartmentalize, our desire to silo, this is not assisting our ability to outmaneuver humanity's grand challenges. In fact, it's constraining them, it's confusing them. Because nature is a system. Life is a system. And our species, Homo sapiens, people, we are of nature. We are because of nature. And our health, our thriving, just like the thriving of any species in the biosphere, is fundamentally interconnected with the biodiversity and the healthy functioning of the planet's life-giving ecosystems. There is no such thing as a nature apart from us. We reside on the web of life, and what we do to this web, we do to ourselves. Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Jonathan Jennings. I am co-CEO of a planetary health organization called Health in Harmony. For 20 years, we have understood that there is no difference between the health of humans and the conservation of nature. This is one and the same. We move global resources into the hands and the climate-critical system solutions of Earth's rainforest guardians. And we do this through reciprocity and trust-based anti-colonial approach. Because the health of Earth's tropical rainforests depends on the spiritual, cultural, and physical thriving of the rainforest guardians, the indigenous peoples, the Afro-descendant peoples, and the traditional guardians of these forests for millennia. We believe these rainforest guardians must be at the center of climate action and climate finance. Now, the Grand Palais is again buzzing. So I want to invite you into this space completely and fully. Close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, wiggle your toes in your shoes, feel the bottoms of your feet firmly on the ground, and let's enter this space fully because we have the privilege today of meeting some remarkable people. People that have dedicated their lives to the conservation of the natural world. Each one of them is doing it differently, but each one of them is essential to the collective mission of the protection of nature and Earth's biosphere. Born and raised in Aceh, Farwiza Farhan, or Wiza, is founder of the Forest, Nature, and Environment Aceh Foundation, the grassroots organization working to protect and restore the looser ecosystem in Sumatra, Indonesia. This is the last place on Earth where rhinos, tigers, elephants, and orangutans still roam the wild together. She is a Time Magazine Time 100 Impact Award winner, a recipient of the Future for Nature Award, and the prestigious Whitley Award for Conservation. And in 2022, she was awarded the National Geographic Wayfinder Award. We're super grateful to have the power of her voice and her leadership here with us today to open our session. So please join me in welcoming the person whose life's work Dr. Jane Goodall called essential. Farwiza Farhan.
For the past 3 days, we have traveled to many places. We've been to the Amazon, we've gone the depth of the ocean, we've hung out with whales. And right at this moment, I want to take you to a place that is close to my heart. And this place is called the Loisa ecosystem. It sits in the northernmost corner of the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. The Loisa ecosystem is the last place on Earth where this critically endangered megafauna, the tiger, the elephant, the rhino, and the orangutan, still roam together in the wild. It is a space of 2.7 million hectares of relatively intact forests, home to various biodiversity, flora, fauna, and fungi. It is also home to 500,000 people living within it, and 5 million people depending on it. For the local communities, this wildlife are incredible, but the importance of the Loisa ecosystem is water. We understand the ecosystem services that this landscape gives to us, because most of us doesn't necessarily live here. But for the local community, the forest is what protects them. The forest is what gives them livelihood. A lot of people have asked me, what is the biggest threat to the Loisa ecosystem? And when they ask that question, they are half expecting an answer that is straightforward. They want me to say that the biggest threat to the Loisa ecosystem is palm oil. The biggest threat to the Loisa ecosystem is mining. That the biggest threat to the Loisa ecosystem is illegal logging. But in truth, it's not that. It's not palm oil, it's not mining, it's not illegal logging. What it is, it's the deprioritization of nature protection. It's the belief that we could engineer our way out of trouble. And the biggest threat to the Loisa ecosystem is the same to the threat to many other landscape and seascape and species. It's the apathy and disempowerment. Let me tell you a story that happened a decade ago. At that time, in 2012, a large palm oil company seek to expand their concession by burning forests illegally. So me and my friends and a bunch of people gathered a campaign together trying to get the government to put this company in jail. It was incredibly difficult because in Indonesian context, in Indonesian regulation, sometimes you clear the land, you burn it before you can claim ownership over it. But this act is clearly illegal. And at that time, so many people felt angry at what this company is doing. And so many people mobilizes. They petitioned the government, they petitioned the court, they mobilized behind these cases so the company eventually get jailed. The director of the company, after a very long court proceeding, the director of the company ended up spending 1 year in prison for burning forests in the Loisa ecosystem. As we were winning this campaign, as we thought we are on the path to restoring this forest, the government of Aceh at that time chose to dismantle the protection of the Loisa ecosystem, the very reason that protect this landscape. I thought that was crazy. I thought that doesn't make sense. But for the government, that's the only reason that makes sense, because they believe that protection of landscapes stands in the way of prosperity. That conservation and protection of landscape like the Loisa ecosystem are the reason why we remain poor. And this problem are not limited to the Loiser ecosystem. This problem is what we are experiencing in Sumatra, in Borneo, in Papua, in the Amazon, in Congo, in Brazil, everywhere. But luckily, the planet is not powerless. The planet speaks. The planet retaliates. And us, humans, we are not powerless. We can take action. In 2017, we come to realize that grassroots communities do have power enshrined in the Constitution to have a say on any development, any exploitation that happen within their area, that happen within their landscapes. However, these rights are often underutilized. Why? I don't know about the local community in the rural of France, but in the rural of Indonesia, local community doesn't necessarily sit around talking about development plans. They don't necessarily sit around discussing environmental impact assessment. They don't necessarily chat with their fellow farmers and say, did you hear about the new law? Very few of the grassroots community lived in that reality. But they know that when forests are deforested, when mines are being carved, that it's their livelihood that get impacted. But oftentimes this happens after the destructions have took place. So what we choose to do at that time, we come into the local community and we ask them, what is your experience? What have you witnessed? What have you seen happen in your landscape? What have you seen happen in your village? And the local community was telling us, we see the water change. We see the air become polluted. We see the soil lost its productivity. And when we ask them, what do you want to do? How do you want to respond to this? And they respond in a way that is most moving. They told me, you know, a few years ago, I experienced flash flood. And the whole time, my whole life, every time floods happen, what came down the mountain is just water. But more and more recently, what came down the mountain is timber and rocks. And not only the flood swept away our homes, it's also destroyed our fields. We could no longer grow what we grow because everything is now ruined. But when we tried to protect the forest up in the mountain, we were challenged. The illegal loggers asked us the question, who are you and what are your authority? They're telling us not to log these mountains. So in that moment, I come to learn that mothers and grandmothers are actually the best protectors of forests because they don't get intimidated by illegal loggers. When these mothers and grandmothers choose to protect the forest and they become forest rangers and they go out and patrol and they come across illegal loggers, first thing they ask is not, why are you illegally logging? First thing they ask is, have you had coffee? Have you had food? Where are you from? Whose son are you? And by asking that question, they are using the existing social structure in the village. They are using the relationships of people that they know. They bring to the realization that everyone, all of us, are connected. And then they ask the question, were you here when the flash flood happened? Did you see what happened to our village? Do you take pride in participating in that? And this is how mothers and grandmothers are incredibly powerful and amazing, because when they did that, instantly disarm and de-escalate the process. So instead of going into a fight with illegal loggers and encroachers and poachers, they moved their hearts to protect the forest. When I thought of rangers growing up, I've always envisioned powerful men with arms go out to fight. But I was lucky, I was raised by a feminist father, a man that believed in the power of women. That has enabled me to further believe in the power of other women. And when these women show me how they shift society, how they protect the forest in ways that men doesn't, it opened my eyes. But then I also asked the men in the village, what do you think about these movements? Because now you see your wife as a forest protector. Now you see the female in this village engaging in direct conversation with high-level officials. They sit with ministers. And they give me the most surprising answer. They said, back then, if the women get involved in a village meeting, usually they would be providing food and they'll be providing coffee. But since they start patrolling, they sit in the meeting, they argue for the village budget. They argue for the village development plan. They are now driving what is happening in this village. And this begin to sprout everywhere in the Loiser ecosystem. Having faith, giving power, and trusting one another that they have the answer to the questions we're all wondering here today. And if there's one thing that I wish you remember from this talk, that thing is the question. If we would ever find a huge oil reserves or critical mineral underneath the Vatican or underneath the Grand Palais, would we choose to dig it? I trust that we won't. In the same way, the Loiser ecosystem, the Amazon, the deep sea, have that same level of cultural importance for the local people in that area, for the indigenous communities. Isn't it time that we give them the same level of respect as we would give the level of respect for the Vatican? Because these places might be, feels like a monument of nature for people that are far away. But for us, people that live in this landscape, these landscapes are our monument of culture. And I hope all of us will bring every power that we have to protect, to conserve, and to restore these wild places. Thank you.
That was incredible. Wow. Thank you so much, Wiza. That was powerful, powerful. Thank you all for making this session part of your Change Now experience. Now I would like to invite 3 more remarkable speakers to the stage. Véronique, Markus, and Santiago. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hi, enchanté. Welcome. There's water, please help yourself. So let me introduce you to these heroes of conservation. Véronique Andrieux has been CEO at Worldwide Fund for Nature France since 2019. Previously, she was regional director of Oxfam and senior policy advisor at the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In 2024, she was made Chevalier of the National Order of Merit in France. Welcome. Santiago Gowland is CEO of the Rainforest Alliance, leveraging social and market forces to create a world where people and nature can thrive in harmony. For 20 years, Santiago created sustainable business models and products at Unilever, Nike, and the Estee Lauder Company, and more recently with the Nature Conservancy before joining Rainforest Alliance. Markus Gilles is a serial entrepreneur, most recently co-founder and CEO of Planet Wild. Launching only 2 years ago, Planet Wild is now active in 25 countries, where unique rewilding projects are developed by a network of environmental pioneers who use storytelling to build one of the most engaged rewilding communities on the internet. Think Greenpeace for the YouTube generation. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us today. Santiago, I would like to start with you. Rainforest Alliance's mission to transform the way the world farms, I believe, is essential to putting us on course to having a livable planet. But I don't want to assume that everyone here with us today understands or is familiar with the mission of Rainforest Alliance. Talk to us about the full meaning of the little green frog that I hope all of you have seen on some of the products that you are purchasing in your everyday life.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I love that presentation by Farwiza, by the way. And as she said, there are so many different approaches to achieve the level of conservation and biodiversity protection that we need, right? And the Rainforest Alliance was founded 40 years ago by Daniel Katz. And also we have Kerry Smith here, one of our board members. You can stand up, Kerry, because she's been with the Rainforest Alliance for, forever, since the beginning. And the passion that brought them together was, how do we conserve biodiversity and, how do we fight against climate, global warming, etc. And because the tropical forests or rainforests are real acupuncture points in planetary health. They have disproportionate level of biodiversity and living carbon sequestered there. You heard from Farwiza, right? These places are unique in the planet, way more important than buildings like this or the Vatican or whatever. They are really last chance ecosystems on which our lives in this planet literally depend. So what do we do about them, right? And I remember when I was at the Nature Conservancy, I was very proud because the Nature Conservancy had bought 60 million hectares of land to protect it, right? To lock it from markets, etc. But in 40 years. But in that same lapse of time, soy alone, one commodity, had deforested 6 billion hectares of land. So the level of destruction that the expansion of the agricultural frontier was creating in the world was a real problem. So our founder, who's still the chair of the board, said, okay, if we don't change the market dynamics, there's absolutely no way we're going to be able to protect these, critical ecosystems. And that's how the frog comes to life, because to change a market, you need two things. You need to really invest on the ground with programs, landscapes, and community work that help producers, become empowered to be those stewards of those ecosystems, and you need to work also at the demand level, where the consumer also needs to be empowered to be in alliance with the producer and drive the market pool for those solutions. So the Rainforest Alliance is an alliance between the producer and the consumer that together, as people, right, that depend on these ecosystems, and our kids and next generations depend on this ecosystem, is how do we make sure that these market forces stop being such a driver of degradation and maybe become actually a source of regeneration of these ecosystems. And this is what we're going to talk about later in this conversation. After 40 years, now the Rainforest Alliance is big, right? So we work with more than 7 million producers in 62 countries. We work in those critical ecosystems where we have teams with boots on the ground that work very closely to the producer to remain producer-centric. And we have also now relationships with many commodities, coffee, chocolate, bananas, all those commodities that are critical to the tropical forest. And we are working hard to shift companies from being the problem to becoming the solution. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Véronique, you and I have something in common, and that is the emergency humanitarian work that we've both done. Before I joined Health and Harmony, I spent about 15 years with Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, and you too have been in the humanitarian industry, and now obviously with WWF. I would like to know, in the emergency context of this environmental crisis, what are the links that you've seen and are aware of between humanitarianism and planetary health that inform how you operationalize nature conservation today?
Well, hello everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for this question. I would say that the climate and biodiversity loss crisis is a slow onset emergency, as we would call it at MSF or Action Against Hunger or any other humanitarian NGO. It's a slow onset emergency that has catastrophic impact on the people, on local communities. We hear on TV on a weekly basis about droughts, floods, sea level rise, mega fires, and counting, right? And so that has an impact in terms of, well, it costs lives. It means deaths. It's human suffering. It disrupts livelihoods. It's a huge driver of internal displacement. It also fuels conflict because natural resources become scarcer and scarcer. Desertification, for instance, makes arable land much more difficult to access and creates further water stress. So this creates insecurity and conflict. So I would say that humanitarian organizations act on the downstream end of the crisis, on the consequences and the effects on the people, whereas environmental NGOs such as WWF, we act on the upstream end of the crisis, right? On the root causes. Yeah. For instance, we advocate for phasing out fossil fuels now. We advocate as well for enhanced energy efficiency and for accelerating renewable energies. So this is acting on the root causes. We also act on resilience and adaptation, in particular through nature-based solutions. When we think forest or wetlands or mangrove, we have to think of ecosystems that protect local communities, that are the cornerstone of their livelihoods and security. And last but not least, and that's where there's commonalities with Rainforest, we work to transform unsustainable production and consumption patterns across the world, the real economy. So with corporates, with finance, of course with public policies, we try to make the case, we try to make the case for, yes, for science-based policies and also for corporate policies and practices that align with science. So I would say that the humanitarian and environmental NGOs complement each other. They are the two sides of the same coin, and they are both essential for life and prosperity.
Thank you. What a unique perspective you have. Thank you for sharing it with us. Markus, my friend, welcome. Your founding story, the story of Planet Wild, is very captivating and compelling. Can you share it with us? Why did you start Planet Wild?
Before Planet Wild, I had already founded a media company. We were bringing the best video stories from all over the world to the palm of your hand, to your phone. We did the whole thing, early prototype, great traction, top-tier investors, millions of users, sold the company at its peak. I went from working in a backyard office in Berlin to the 82nd floor of the World Trade Center in New York. So I literally felt on top of the world there for a moment. But after years of accelerating startup life, I also felt that something was missing. I'd grown up in the countryside, and I started to feel this urge to reconnect to nature again. I grabbed my backpack and went to Alaska on what turned out to become the longest journey in my life, which over many months led me all the way to the other end of the world, to the south tip of Patagonia. An amazing adventure during which I also realized that the nature that I had come to reconnect to had become under threat everywhere. That iconic road trip in the US was covered at the time for 1,000 miles by wildfire smoke. Diving the famous Blue Hole in Belize, only to see that the surrounding corals were bleaching. Yeah. Bushwhacking through the heart of the Amazon, the most biodiverse place on Earth, just to learn about all the ways that corruption is leading to its demise. And then seafaring past Tierra del Fuego's gigantic glaciers, which are now receding at a record pace. So I came back home and realized I needed to do something. And I started talking to people that have dedicated their lives to protecting ecosystems. And then it hit me. It's their stories that need to be told. And that's how Planet Wild was born. Within 1 year, we became the fastest growing nature protection organization on YouTube, going from initially 12 to now 12,000 supporting members, individuals and now also companies. Every month, we go and team up with rewilding pioneers at the front lines and help them reach their goals by providing funding. Of course, that's crucial, but also by telling their stories and engaging videos that are quickly started to reach millions. That means educating and engaging people all around the world about our planet's most threatened ecosystems and also the solutions.
Yeah. Since meeting you, my kids have become enormous fans of Planet Wild, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Véronique, I think probably everybody in the building knows WWF, but talk to us about the evolution or the difference in approaches that WWF has taken to the conservation of nature over its 50-year history.
Okay, so our mission, I would say, at WWF is to protect people and nature, very simply. I would say through 3 levers. One is expertise. We put forward science-based solutions, policy solutions, programmatic solutions. The second is about conserving, protecting the planet, restoring. And the third is about transforming the economy, transforming finance, and public policy, as I said. The main changes, I would say, I would name 3. One is we have evolved over time towards increasingly people-centered conservation. Farwiza said it very eloquently. It's about local communities, indigenous people. They are the nature custodians, the first ones. When I see, for instance, the numbers of global witness about environmental defenders that are killed every year, it's mainly local communities and indigenous peoples in countries in Latin America and Africa and so on. So people-centered conservation, I would say, is one. I have examples in Congo Basin, for instance. We work with local communities to do surveillance in protected areas, to do biomonitoring. They are trained and they do it with digital tools. Another change, I would say, is about scale. I mean, the urgency is so huge. It's millions of hectares, right, that are a threat. So it's about, developing scale through innovative financial and programmatic mechanisms. We have developed, for instance, here in France, a program that is called Nature Impact, which is about protecting forests through payment for environmental services. So we have two metrics, one on carbon, one on biodiversity, and we pay forest owners for doing what is right. A third change, I would say, is about storytelling. We need to change the narrative, right? I mean, science is there, and it's good. But we have to look at ourselves as well, and to also be a bit critical, right? Did we do everything we could? There is a lot of anxiety. I think everybody gets the crisis, but still we're not getting through at the scale and speed that we should. So we need to reinvent and revamp the narrative. How? Well, by connecting to what people care for, their health. I mean, polluted air, polluted soils, polluted water, nothing good can come from that. For our health, of course, but also for our housing and property. I recall The Economist having its front page on the housing crisis that is yet to come, because it will become impossible to insure, so impossible to fund. It's also about our economies, our livelihoods, and also, more deeply, maybe because we're in Europe, to our values. I think that Europe has a very interesting legislation when it comes to climate and biodiversity, although at risk, and maybe we can touch on that a bit later. But it speaks to the core of our values, of our identities, of who we are. It's a matter of dignity. It's a matter of purpose. And so I believe that this new narrative is something we collectively should be working on much more in the future.
Excellent segue into the question for Markus. Give us some concrete examples of how Planet Wild is changing the narrative. And I believe we have a film to back you up.
Happy to. Yeah, thanks for allowing me to show some clips here. We're really working on a wide range of interventions. So everything from landscape restoration to ocean protection to reintroduction of species. What connects all these projects is, of course, the people on the ground that are doing incredible work at the front lines of nature protection for all of us. And yet, most of us have never heard about their stories, like the story of Paolo, an Italian fisherman who's teaming up with artists to stop bottom trawling. They're seeing marble sculptures that are blocking the trawlers' nets, protecting marine life while also raising awareness in a spectacular way. Or that of Masalu, who's protecting elephants with the help of bees. Turns out elephants are afraid of them, and all that's needed to nudge them away from human settlement and violent conflict is a fence of beehives alongside wildlife corridors. Or the story of Peter and Günther, who worked for 30 years to rewild a post-Soviet landscape in East Germany so they could finally reintroduce the little owl to its former habitat. We're now helping the environmental pioneers in 25 countries reach new goals. And by integrating storytelling into every step of our operation, we created a really unique ability to make people care. Just for comparison, we've now been around since 2 years, and we're reaching 200 times more people on YouTube than Greenpeace. That is the untapped potential and the great power of storytelling. And believe me when I say that everywhere somebody's protecting a part of nature, there's a story that people are eager to hear. But we need to focus on the positive and on the solutions that are out there. People have been writing us daily since the first video we put out that this is the kind of news they've been longing for, that it gives them hope, reminds them that we have the power to fix things, and even inspires them to start their own projects. Everything from backyard rewilding to million-dollar operations. And that makes storytelling the biggest unused lever, in my opinion, in nature protection.
Yeah. Solutions exist, and the people of the place have them. Santiago, when we spoke, first off, you blew me away. It was one of the best conversations I've had in a long time. But you spoke a lot about the global markets, and I would like to ask you to talk to us today about reversing the reality and shifting the role of markets from being the biggest problem to being the biggest solution.
Thank you, Jonathan. I want to build on what you're saying, Markus, because at the end of the day, in this window that we have as a generation, right, in this kind of planet spaceship that is really in big problems, there is as much as a supply kind of challenge as it is a marketing challenge. And if we don't mobilize the billions of people that consume every day to be part of the solution, it is almost impossible to get to the Paris Accord, the Convention for Biodiversity, etc. So when you look at markets today, there are a lot of examples where this positive reinforcement is happening. For example, in Guatemala, in the Mayan forest, one of the biggest tropical forests still standing, that we need to kind of protect. We've been working for 25 years in an area called Petén. And a little bit to what Farwiza was also saying, that community that is managing the forest sustainably and making a living out of the forest are the single strongest stewards of that ecosystem health. Even more than protected areas, national parks, etc. Why? Because when the community benefits from the forest standing, then you don't see fires, you don't see illegal logging, you don't see a lot of the issues that you see in other places. And that community empowerment is absolutely fundamental. Now, the Rainforest Alliance is also producer-centric and committed to boots on the ground. We're not a think tank or some sort of, a lobby organization. We work deep in the communities, and we've always done that, right? But without connecting them to markets, without rewarding that effort, without making sure that producers benefit more by getting premiums, by getting technical assistance, training, access to markets, etc., then this doesn't really work. So the challenge is, how do you empower the producers, but then how do you provide a mechanism for consumers to vote also with a wallet, to get market pull, so that brands are not just exposed through compliance and transparency, but they also have a mechanism to invest more in those places. And so markets will really become part of the solution where we can get this equation right, when through data, transparency, and finance, you can support those producers to become stewards and thrive with nature together and not, against nature. And that's kind of the equation where the Rainforest Alliance is focusing on. The markets have been incredibly, in a way, pervasive in terms of externalization of costs. They were looking for free nature, cheap labor. This is, the whole commodity system was built on it. But there's something changing right now, and you can see it in cocoa, you can see it with coffee. When you look at the science, there's 50% less land for coffee by 2050 than it is today. Companies are beginning to realize that if they don't invest in those communities and ecosystems, there's no business in the future. Global warming is already kind of degrading land. So for the whatever reasons, maybe it's not from an ethical or moral reason, but from a survival imperative, markets need to come together. And when you look at agriculture, which is 15% of the global GDP and 40% of the global employment, you need agriculture to be part of the solution, not the problem. You can't leave that massive force, out of the picture of a sustainable future.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And so unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time together, but I want to ask all of you to comment and to close on the responsibility of the consumer. Humans are outstripping Earth's carrying capacity. Véronique, you've spoken very profoundly on the Earth's overshoot. Santiago, I know you and Markus have too, but I would invite you to close and leave us with some comments on the role of the consumer in reining in the pressure that we put on this planet and life-giving ecosystems. Véronique, let's start with you.
Definitely. I mean, we are citizens, we are consumers, we are voters, and through all of those acts, we make choices. And so make a choice for the planet is always the best choice because it goes in your self-interest. As I said, it's I mean, everything that depends on it. Farwiza was mentioning the link between nature and prosperity. Some governments can see it as a constraint that is a barrier to prosperity. But on the contrary, nature is the cornerstone. It's the building block, essential building block for everything that we do for our lives. So that's the power that we have. We can use all of those decisions. But I would just finish saying that the whole responsibility cannot fall on our shoulders as citizens and consumers. I'm sorry, about corporates, about financial institutions, about governments. They do have to play their part. It's very important to understand that for decades there's been a lot of voluntary initiatives that have yielded zero result. So that's why legislation matters, and that's why we're also fighting for instance, at EU level, to have legislation that is science-based and that we can ask our governments to be accountable for.
Thank you, thank you. 30 seconds, Santiago. 30 seconds, Markus.
Okay. So how many here had coffee this week or ate a chocolate? Raise your hand. It says almost everybody, right? And so that's the deal, right? I mean, when we can make sure that the brands that we pick have a program behind them that is working to protect people and nature, and if we begin to drive and require more transparency, more data, more evidence that there is, an effort to revert the situation, that's what we're going to see. This is, for me, a creative and marketing challenge as much as it is a science and a producer community support challenge, And the moment we can drink a cup of coffee and know that that cup of coffee is actually leaving the community and the environment better, not worse, that it's giving more than it's taking from people and nature, when that happens, the full power of consumption, which is today the driver of ecological overshoot in the planet, working for restoration, that's going to be an important, interesting era. And I think we are ushering into that era, and it's going to happen in the following year. So watch that space.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Markus, closing words?
Yeah, it's an interesting and age-old question. Is it corporate responsibilities or consumers' responsibilities? I think if we can learn one thing from biodiversity is that everything is connected. So if we look at that blame-shifting game often, like, the consumers should demand better products, or as citizens they should vote better politicians, or the politicians should make better laws that regulate companies, or companies should just offer better products. I think underlying all of that, in each of these institutions and roles, it's humans. And I think rather than shifting the blame or trying to see where is the only source of truth, recognize that wherever we find ourselves in that circle, we have the power to act at each of these instances.
Yeah. Well, let's give them a big hand. Thanks to all of you. It's been a privilege to share the stage with you. Thank you so much. Thanks, my friend. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks, dude. That was fantastic. Thank you. Okay, now we have a fireside chat, so please don't leave. There's no fire. But I would like to invite Sheherazade to the stage. Sada, where are you? Please come and join me. I'll try to be a better host. Please, please come. There you go. You sit there. Water.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
We are, finally.
Can I give you a hug? Thank you so much.
Oh, are you kidding? Thank you. Okay, let me introduce you for the people. Sara founded PROGRES, a Sulawesi-based conservation NGO that protects threatened yet overlooked wildlife by weaving together people-centered and knowledge-based approaches to create just, collective, and impactful conservation strategies. She's a Fulbright scholar who co-founded Tambora Muda, one of the first national-level networks for Indonesian young conservationists. And she recently became part of the steering committee that established the IUCN Species Specialist Group in Indonesia to amplify global South leadership and bridge collaborative conservation across regions. Sara is a One Young World Ambassador and one of the Prince Albert of Monaco Foundation's Regeneration Future Leaders. So welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Happy to be here.
So thank you so much for putting ChangeNOW in your busy schedule. And I just want to start by asking you about your journey. Your journey as a leader in conservation, it's a fascinating story. What motivated you to found PROGRES, your own conservation organization?
Ooh, long story, Jonathan. I'm from Palu, which is a city in Sulawesi. That's the middle part of Indonesia. And I remember there was a time in my childhood that my parents need to mix one egg and flour to make it adequate, to have it enough for me and my brother and sister to eat. And during that time, my dad told us that, Sarah, Oneng, Terry, we don't have anything, but you only have your brain and your heart, and that's will be your savior and salvations in life. And that's kind of what I keep remembering all my life, that to think and don't be shy away with my own thoughts, and then always tuning on what my heart feels, Jonathan. And for my career, I used to work in a big international conservation NGO in Indonesia for 3 years, and I'm very grateful for that experience. I very appreciate the support, and then I've met a lot of valuable networks and friends that I'm still connected with, so I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
At the same time is that I had gone through a lot of personal dilemma. 12 years ago in Indonesia, I found myself in the space where the discussion treating people as an afterthought, treating people as a mere technical components that you kind of check the box and for the success of the effectiveness of a certain projects.
Yeah.
And really the whole process of thinking about people and nature doesn't sit nicely on my heart. The whole process feeling that nature is decoupled by people, from the people. We need to conserve nature, we need to manage nature as it's a part that's separated from us. So really during that time, I'm really questioning that this kind of approach of conservation, isn't it like the only models in the conservations in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia, or even the global South? So at that time, I think this shouldn't be the case. This should not be the model, the only way. And that's what kind of PROGRES is all about. We establish it to challenge the status quo, to show that there's other way to do conservations that attune to diverse ways of knowing, of living, of people that actually living in the high biodiversity places around the world, like Indonesia, and you work across the global South, Jonathan's. So really, at that time, I had a hard time to find the words what I'm fighting for. Well, I need to learn English word by word with a candle, listening to Westlife song. I'm 90s, I don't know if anyone know Westlife. Is it like an Irish or a British boy band? But I learned English, but I also learned to find the words what I'm fighting for. And I learned is to decolonize conservation, is to really redefine conservation in my own terms, in our own terms, and claim our voices, and claim our agency, what conservation actually mean to us. And that's what PROGRES is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to know you is to know your head and your heart. To getting to know you, it's been a pleasure for me. your conservation journey took you to the US,
Yes.
where you got a master's and then a PhD. How did the experience influence progress and the value that you place on indigenous knowledge systems and culture?
Yeah. Well, I'm still trying to finish my PhD, Jonathan, so I'm not getting there. But really, it's for me, I'm a rebel, and then I'm a very curious person. So about the conservation, I will trace it down to where it was originated. So I went to the US, and it's really a transformative experience to me. I embrace that half of me is a scientist. I'm a small but a giant nerd. So I love science, but at the same time, I love doing the real impacts at the grassroots level.
Yeah.
And then pursuing the education in the US really opened my eyes, which is like sounds like an antithesis of what's the science all about. But that's what I find the words about the difference of knowledge system. In the US, I had a privilege to talk with indigenous community, with people who are fighting for their land, and kind of giving other alternative to conservations that attune to their diverse ways of living. And at that time, I realized, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, Indonesia, my homeland, and Sulawesi, we have other type of knowledge system, and I have not done the justice before by just relying on the scientific part of it, on the Western science. So really that experience transforming my approach through PROGRES. We now using different type of knowledge system. We leverage upon the Western science, but also really championing the local and indigenous knowledge. For example, Jonathan, it took us 3 years to make only one children book because we took our time to understand what is this meaning of this tiny, tiny fish called Rono and Bungu, and what are the cultural meaning, the local narrative about this fish that's meaningful from the community, and that's what we amplify through our education program. It's not about telling the community, these are the fish that you need to know, and these are the fish that you need to protect.
Right.
But really, we combine this different knowledge system and really championing the indigenous and local voices in the process.
Yeah, and you're a leader in that, that interscientific dialogue. Indigenous science, indigenous ways of knowing.
Yeah.
Provide humanity with a pathway out of the climate crisis, absolutely. So you're a champion for species that don't get a lot of conservation attention.
Yeah.
And when we spoke a few weeks ago about the conservation of overlooked species, you told me that your dream is starting to come true, and I just would like for you to talk to the audience about your dream.
Yes. Just 2 weeks ago, we make a workshop and a webinar, especially for people who are working in the middle and the eastern part of Indonesia, so Sulawesi, Nusa Tenggara, Maluku, Papua, and Papua Barat. And then at that time, I facilitated the Sulawesi hub, Jonathan, and in that space, I was really happy to hear the buzz of different Sulawesi dialects in this conservation space that I've never heard before. It's either English or in Jakarta Logue dialect, but never been delivered in my languages.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that 12 years ago, people talk about Farwiza, don't get me wrong, I love tigers, I love orangutan, I love rhino, but no one talks about bats. No one talks about these tiny fish, tortoises, couscous, and in that meeting, I was so happy and so stoked that people talk about, Sarah, how about shrimps? Like tiny shrimp with a very difficult scientific names. Talk about orchid, talk about stingless bee. And no one like asking, oh yeah, would you please to provide a comprehensive justifications of why we should care? And I think that's the point, Jonathan. When we accept that other beings on this planet have the rights to share the space with us. So if you read PROGRES strategic programs, like our ally, Mike Balzer, he used to work for WWF, he will say to me, Sarah, your program's full of love. And that's what all about the PROGRES is, to introduce how to love unconditionally, that you can love and you're capable of loving without so many reason and justification. Yeah. And for all these overlooked species, Jonathan, they're so meaningful to the community. Indonesian, Southeast Asian love durian.
Yeah.
And durians are pollinated by bats. I know probably most of the people here don't like it or despise it. And then the tiny fish is a pride of local delicacy from the Lake Poso. So there's bantiluku, which is the tortoises can only be found in Sulawesi. Its main color is yellow, and that's the color of a local ethnic group, Kaili, where the tortoises are found. So there's this rich cultural meaning of these species that we never talked about 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, that dream start to come true on these streams, orchids, stingless bee, and really warm my heart. Yeah.
The web of life, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we had the pleasure of listening to a very powerful woman open the session, Wiza, and you are also powerful of heart and mind. And the list of women leading conservation efforts around the world is extraordinary. Yeah? What has the journey been like for you in Indonesia and then globally to establish your authority, your leadership in conservation?
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm very grateful for the women who really opened the path for the next generation of women. So it's a bit easier, Kawiza, but not really. So the journey has been really tough, Jonathan. I think there are so many layers that you need to get through, you know, coming from quite unfortunate economic and social background, and also as a woman from the rural part of Indonesia, there were layers of social expectation. I didn't know that there is a job called conservationist. I only know that, oh, I want to work for forests and animals. That's it. And then people around me want to be doctor or government officers.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is other options of like other than being a wife or being married. But now I can choose to not getting married yet. I don't know, maybe yet. but it's the journey has been quite tough. But the thing is that a lot of joy and also fulfillment. Jonathan, if you visit Sulawesi, if anyone visits Sulawesi, you could feel the heart of the people. We survive life through laughter, through like laughing at sometimes at inappropriate time. So even though it's a rough, but it's very fulfilling journey. We operated with only $150 per month, and that is from my mentor, and with 2 second-hand motorcycles for 4 years. So even though it's tough, we can still find the joy out of it. And really the woman, I'm at this position because of my mentor. I want to call out her name, Susan Sang, and also Mbak Anim, who is my co-director. And Dave, the one that mentoring me for 10 years, supporting me financially to access all these opportunities around the globe. So I'm very grateful for that. And men allies, like you are one of my inspirations, Jonathan, with the Health in Harmony. And Matt Linky from WCS Indonesia and now in Latin America, Mike Balzer. So the male allies around the globe is really also the one that's supporting me and setting me up for this journey. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, thank you, but we're riding your coattails. Yeah, that's the truth. In Indonesia, speaking from Indonesian context, how can you and Wiza create more of you and Wiza, whether it's men or women? I mean, are you feeling like there is a new generation of, whether they're young people or middle-aged people, who are understanding that Indonesia's role in planetary health is magnificent?
Yeah. I think I share a similar approach with Kawiza in Aceh. In Sulawesi, we are doing it at the very grassroots level, Jonathan. And for women, especially me and my co-director, who is also a woman, we're very targeted and very intentional on who that we want to partner with. For example, for our community and scientist network, we only want to work with female lecturers from the local university because they never get a chance and funding to do biodiversity research. We supported female students who always like back down from biodiversity research because the field is unsafe. It's just technically very unfeasible for them. So we support their journey at the finest and detail level of how is it to make them feel safe to start their own journey in this conservation space. And we really invest in people. If I can choose, I always trust in people until they give me a reason that, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't trust him or her or them anymore. But we choose to believe in the goodness of the people. And even though PROGRES now working with about 100 community members, and as I told you 1 week ago, it's a bit creepy because we know each one of them, their names, their family, their houses, their children's, every single soul that ever touched with PROGRES, and that connections is what is meaningful. And for women, talking about empowering the next generation, for women, that connections, heart by heart, that I matter, I'm significant. That's very powerful for them to stay in this career. So last year, I'm preparing for retirement, no. But
already?
No. But starting last year, we already have Sasi and Winnie, 2 girls from Sulawesi who went to Singapore. They barely can speak English, but you can do it, you can prepare it. But they're the ones that showcasing Sulawesi biodiversity in Singapore to celebrate World Wildlife Fund. And then we also have Pikra and Kilo, who has been with me for 7 years. They were only high school graduates, and then when they were single, now they have family and son and daughters. And they started by learning how to type in Microsoft Word and how to make a schedule in Microsoft Excel. But I was so proud that last year, they were the one that going to the conference and showcasing their own bat conservation program. So I really taking just a step back and cheerleader behind the scene, creating the infrastructures to give the access and support that these wonderful young people from Sulawesi to speak up, to really claim their voices and to fight for their land.
Well, what a mentor and example they have in you. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
In the short time we have left, where do you go from here? Where does your dream go from here, your journey? What's next for you? And what do you hope to accomplish? And how does your dream end?
I think the next one will be, so conservation has, in Indonesia, or at least in Sulawesi, sometimes is considered as an enemy of the development, that they don't care about the well-being of the people. So I really want to change that in a way that conservation can contribute for people to live in a more dignified way, Jonathan. And your works with conservation and health, I think that's very inspiring. And I think that's what my dream is, on how conservation can contribute to a more dignified life of community that live in and around the rainforest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I want to invite you to come with me. We're going to close together. Let's thank these nice people for giving us their time and attention.
Thank you so much for being here.
We really appreciate you all making this session a part of your ChangeNOW experience. And please engage with the people that you met today online, get to know more about us and the work that we do, and join the collective mission for nature. So thank you all very much, and thank you, ChangeNOW.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.